he could stand it. I mean, he had the power in his speeches to move the masses.
As he listens to BBC, he is immediately convinced that they're telling the truth.
My friend Helmuth thought that was his Christian obligation to warn the people. And then he opened the door and there comes my friend Rudy. And I said, Rudy, what are you doing here? He is the third in our group. I said, what do you mean the third? Who is the second? And Helmuth typed on it, Hitler the murderer, Hitler is the guilty one.
The first thing we see is that he's emerged from some kind of a process as a full-blown anti-Nazi. He puts the prefix VER on the front of the word Führer, which means that Hitler is now the seducer of the people.
I opened the door and there stood two guys with that long dark leather coat, and he lifted up his lapel from the coat and there was the badge, Geheime Staatspolizei, Gestapo. The Nazis, they don't want you to know the truth. The truth was deadly.
Hey everybody, welcome to another live stream from the Truth and Conviction series. I am Matt Whitaker, the creator and director of the Truth and Conviction series, and happy to be with you. I want to extend a warm welcome to all of our faithful Truth and Conviction fans who are here, and also all of our wonderful Angel Studios fans who are tuning in. I know that we have quite a few new Truth and Conviction fans who are tuning in. There's been a huge surge of interest in the project just over the past week or so, and so it's been really fun to see just so many people finding out about the project, expressing their interest, and getting excited along with the rest of us. This is a live stream that I've been looking forward to for quite a while, and we're going to talk about some things that are near and dear to my heart, and that I think they're really fascinating and really kind of come to the heart of why we're trying to tell this story. About Helmuth Hübener, about this 16-year-old kid who stood up to Hitler with his two best friends. So very excited about what we get to dive into tonight, and I hope everyone else will be as well. October is going to be a huge month for Truth and Conviction. Already, I think what's today, the 5th, and already so much has happened. And there's so many things that are planned for this month. Some of them I'll be able to tell you about. Some of them I'm only going to be able to tease about or just give some hints on because we're not, well, to be honest, they're not letting me announce it yet, but I'm going to tease it as best I can and see what you can figure out from that. One of the really cool things that I am allowed to tell you about tonight is that if you tuned in to our last live stream, which was a few weeks ago, I talked about the fact that 2022 is the 80th anniversary of when Helmuth was finally, and his friends were finally arrested and were put on trial and stood trial before, the highest court in Nazi Germany, before a Hitler-appointed judge, when Helmuth was sentenced and his friends were sentenced, and then ultimately the 80th anniversary of his execution, which took place on October 27th, 1942. And there is now, where he was executed, that chamber, that building, this old brick, low-roofed brick building, you can see an image there. That's Plötzensee prison outside of Berlin. And on the left side of just kind of the left side, you see that little low roofed, it was actually just a shed, but they converted it into an execution chamber. And that's where Helmuth was held for these years. I mean, if you look at this photo, it's just, it's actually distressing to see it, but it's a guillotine, and that is the guillotine that took Helmuth's life and many, many others. And of course, after the war, that room became, at first spontaneously became a memorial as people were going to those who had lost loved ones there. And then within about 10 years, I believe, in the mid-50s, became a national memorial. And now it's a place, a beautiful place where people can go to remember those who lost their lives standing up for truth, standing up to Hitler. Gedenkstätte Plötzensee. It's the Plötzensee Memorial, named after the Plötzensee prison, which it is adjacent to, and then again, that's another just a good shot of the building. Helmuth would have walked right past those doors and around the corner into that door you're seeing there on the left, which is open, and that's where it is. So I show you all of these because the German government is on the 27th of October this year is holding a memorial service. There's a shot. We were able to be with Karl. That's Karl-Heinz Schnibbe in the middle. And quite a number of years ago, we all look a little different now, but that's me standing with Karl outside of Plötzensee, outside of the memorial. And what an incredibly powerful experience that was. As I was saying, the government, the German government, is holding a memorial service in honor of Helmuth on the 27th of October. And my partners and I at Kaleidoscope Pictures just said, you know what, we're going to be there. We actually even said we weren't positive at first if they were going to be honoring him this year. We kind of assumed they were because they have on kind of important years in the past. But we just kind of said, you know what, even if they're not, we're going to be there on that day to memorialize and to honor Helmuth in that space. And then, of course, when we did find out that the government was planning a beautiful ceremony, then we've been coordinating with them. And one of my big announcements, and I'm just so excited about this, is that we are going over as a crew, and we're bringing some cameras with us, and we'll be appropriately covering that event, our participation in it. The prison and this memorial is outside of Berlin. Of course, you may know that Helmuth lived in Hamburg, which is about 3 hours kind of north of Berlin, and that's where he performed. That's where they were putting out the flyers. That's where he was arrested and interrogated by the Gestapo. That's where he grew up, as a little boy, and grew up to be a teenager there in Hamburg. And that same week, in a couple of weeks here on the 26th of October, they'll be also holding a memorial service for him there at a school that he attended when he was a youth, which is now called the Helmuth Hübener School in his honor. And so we'll be over there to share and participate in those events, but also we're going to include you. We want you to be a part of this. That's the beautiful thing about making a series or making a movie the way that Angel Studios does. Is it, we use the word crowdfunding, which I guess has its own connotations and everything like that, but I see it as we're building a community. And you folks are just as excited and hopeful and involved in this process as we are. And so we want you to be a part of that time that we're going to be spending in Germany, in Berlin, and in Hamburg. And so we're going to be sending out daily social posts, social media posts. We're doing 2 live streams, including one live stream on the 27th. Normally we're here on Wednesday nights. That's a Thursday night, and so you can put that on your calendars that we'll be live streaming from Berlin, from near the site where Helmuth spent his last hours and last minutes, and we'll be doing, I think, a very tender and probably a little bit of an emotional live stream that night. And so I'm just so excited about it, and I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that. Another thing that I'm going to just tease a little bit is that just less than a week ago, this past weekend, we began airing our first promo commercial on television. And it was just this little 30-second commercial that was cut together, and we're going to premiere it here for everyone to see If you don't live in the areas where it was broadcast, we're going to premiere it here, and you'll get to see that later in the broadcast. Oh, and I've got Esther who brought me, oh my goodness. Okay, so these are folks who just in the last few minutes have expressed interest in this project, and I gotta read some names off. This is so cool. So Laura G expressed interest at $150. Mark M also at $150. Anonymous at $500. Sawyer G at $2,000. Several more anonymous. We got an anonymous at $1,000, anonymous at $500, another anonymous at $500. It is so cool to see this happen. Just over the last, I think I mentioned that earlier, but just over this past week, there's just been this huge upsurge in interest from all of you, and the expressions of interest have been just incredible. And it's so, if you've tuned into any of these before, you know that I and my team have been at this for a long, long time trying to tell this story. So to feel this just huge burgeoning surge, see a note there from Jenny Hydebreeder, amen, a wonderfully caring community, referencing this community that we're building. And Jenny, thank you for that comment. And thank you again to these that I've named, but also thousands of others who have been expressing interest just in the last several days. And if you'd like to express interest now, please just go to angel.com/truth, and you can express interest there and check that out. And I should say, I want to just take a minute, and if I could give you a peek behind the scenes of these wonderful live streams that we do. I may seem slightly calm or just kind of relaxed, and I actually am now, but 3 minutes ago, there was a whole team of people trying to make sure that everything was working, and this is the first time that I've got actually an earpiece in, so there was just a little whisper in my ear, and I'm still getting used to that. I think I would be a horrible undercover CIA agent, except for this. I can do this thing. I can talk into my wrist, but other than that, I don't think I would do it well. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes, how I do with the earpiece. But anyway, yeah, like I was saying, we're going to be showing you a kind of premiering this little really cool 30-second commercial that we cut together that's begun airing and will be airing more on TV stations, and it'll be online, and we'll show that to you later. Also, the best part of this live stream is going to be that my two partners, Russ Kendall and John Foss, are going to be tuning in. They're going to be joining us remotely. Wish we could have them here in person, but it was going to get a little crowded. So they will be joining us remotely. I just see Anonymous just to play or express interest at another $1,000. Thank you for that. But like I was saying, Russ and John will be joining us, and I'm looking forward to having them there. There's something. It's one thing to be doing these by yourself and to be kind of the one who's got to look down the barrel of this camera and just got to carry that, carry the show. As soon as Russ and John join me, there's just like 2/3 of the weight goes off my shoulders. So really looking forward to that and to their insights. And I'll tell you in just a little bit what we're going to talk about, because it's super cool. I did mention about going to angel.com/truth, where you can express interest. I also wanted to know, if you've been there before, you should go back, because we've got a really cool new landing page. That's what they call that. So Ryan, can you bring that? There you go. First of all, if you'll see, expressed interest at over 2.7 million is just mind-blowing for me, and it just keeps growing so fastly. But yeah, if you just kind of scroll down, you can see this new landing page. And if I can just stop you right there on that first quote, we have that beautiful image of Helmuth, and then I'm just going to read this first quote, which says, and this is from Gerald R. Molin, who was the producer on Schindler's List and won the Academy Award for that. When he read our script for Truth and Conviction, you can see it there, and I'll just read it. He said, "I've had the opportunity to read some phenomenal scripts in my 50-plus years in the business. and now again I've been blessed to have read a masterpiece. This story has moved me to a sense of pride, country, honor, duty, and tears. I can tell you, getting that from the producer who made Schindler's List, and having that reaction as he read our script for this story meant a lot and still means a lot. So anyway, if you can see, I invite you to go to angel.com/truth and just check out our new landing page. There's just lots of really good, interesting things to learn more about the show, learn what our intent is. And in fact, Ryan, do you mind bringing that up one more time? I just wanted to point out one more thing, and I promise I'll move on. If you scroll down just a little bit more, you see that right there. It says invest in the rising generation. And that's one of the real thrusts of this story. I love the Gen Zers. I'm so hopeful for the future of the world and of this country. And I think they get a bad rap sometimes. But I also know that they're really trying to figure out where the truth is. And I think that in a small way, but I think in an important way, Truth and Conviction, this series, is an opportunity to invest in that generation, in that rising generation, and show them someone. They've got plenty of influencers, of social influencers that they're being bombarded with. Sometimes they just need some better role models. And to be able to sit down with them and watch a series about kids their age who took a stand for truth, who stood up to Hitler and were willing to pay the ultimate price to do that. That's one of the main reasons that we're trying to tell this story. I have kids. I know so many of you out there have kids, have had teenagers, or have them now, or are going to have them. And to be able to share this kind of a story with them and give them an example, a role model of some teenagers who did something incredibly brave, is what makes all of this worth it. Okay, let's see. I think, all right, I'm just going to dive into one more thing that I wanted to get to. And this has been on my mind a lot lately. I was going back and reading Rudy Voba, his account. He wrote a book about his experiences being one of the three boys, and in it he gives this beautiful little insight where he says he's talking about the last moments that Helmuth actually spent, that they had with him after Helmuth was sentenced to death, and they were sentenced to years in prison. They were then kind of walked into and put in this little cell together and really just had a few moments to say their last goodbyes. Yeah, very similar to that image you're seeing there. And by Rudy's account, the last words that Helmuth ever said to his two best friends were, "Remember me." And then he was pulled from the room, and those are the last words that they heard him say. And those two words have just continued to ring through the decades. And I know that Carl and Rudy, that became their mission. That's why they both wrote books. That's why they would share the story as often as they could, so that they and we would remember what Helmuth did. And so those two words, "remember me," have just been ringing in my mind. And so that's why we're going to Germany, to Plitzensee, to remember. That's why we're trying to make this series. That's why I'm sitting here in front of more cameras than you can see, talking to you, because I want to follow Helmuth's last words and try and help all of us to remember him. And so with that in mind, I do want to ask you as well, I wish you could see kind of I'm sure you will in a minute here, but if you could see in front of me, I've got notes and papers and stuff just kind of all over the place. And so if I seem just a little bit scattered, you can kind of see a little bit of it here. We're going to get to some of this, but I also want to invite you at the end of this live stream, or toward the end, I hope to have a few minutes at least to be able to answer some of your questions. So if you have any questions as you're watching, or comments or anything like that, please comment below, post them below, and somebody will bring those to me, and I'll be able to see them and try and answer some of your questions. And I would also just say, just to comment below, put your name, where you're from. Heck, put something interesting about yourself. The algorithm knows you and loves you, and we love to keep the algorithm happy. So the more comments, the more questions, the better, and I will get to as many as I can and have time for at the end. Okay, let's see, Ryan. I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anything. I think we're okay. Ryan says he thinks we're good to go. So I am going to invite my two partners. I shouldn't say partners in crime, especially on this kind of a story. My two wonderful partners, Russ Kendall and John Foss, in. Can we bring them in? Oh, there they are. Hey, guys.
Hey, we made it.
It's good to see you both. Thank you. Again, I feel more relaxed already. I'm just going to introduce to everybody one of the main things. If you saw the title of this live stream, I believe that it was, you saw Power of the Word. And, Russ and John, all these many years ago that we were introduced to this story, and talking to people, talking to Karl-Heinz Schnibbe, and he was talking about these flyers and these leaflets that Helmuth typed up and putting them out, and how the Gestapo was just so so obsessed with hunting down whoever was putting out these flyers and everything like that. It's been a really interesting thing to actually read what Helmuth wrote. We have, because some of the flyers were turned into the Gestapo, and those were in a very organized way. They were notated and filed, and because of that, I don't know that I can say I'm glad that people turned them into the Gestapo, but 80 years later, I'm grateful that we have copies of some of them that were turned in. So I'll say that Helmuth started out by writing, and you guys know this, he started out just by typing on these little kind of quarter sheet size pieces of paper. I can set this down. Maybe we've got an overhead look you guys can kind of see. Now, obviously, can you kind of see that? Obviously,
there you go, yeah.
These are reproductions. Not only are they not the originals, but they're also not in German. They're in English, English translations of these, because we're going to be sharing some of the things that Helmuth wrote. But you can see he started with the red ones and kind of just typing some kind of concise little things, either just really against Hitler, or Hitler as a murderer, and everything. But eventually, that wasn't enough for him, and so he went to full-size sheets of white paper, went from flyers to leaflets, and it's cool. I've seen copies of the originals, and it was like there's almost no margins. And if you can see that, I'll put that down there so maybe you can kind of see that. It's like he just was like trying to squeeze as many words as he possibly could onto every single page, and that's what he was typing up prolifically, and then making photocopies of those on a mimeograph at his church, and then handing them out to his two friends, Carl and Rudy, and then the three of them would go out on the streets at night and put these out. But it's been
amazing. Yeah, Matt, with the flyers that because we took this last week to revisit these pamphlets and flyers and to look at what he's written. I think we looked at almost 20 of them, but like you just showed us on that small red leaflet, they started out. It looks like they just started out really small, and they're almost like poems in a way. The way that he wrote them. But then, like looking at that white sheet of paper, I was just so impressed by how much he's writing, how much information he's conveying to all of his readers. It's as though, I mean, because back then, of course, there's no television or radio that's really telling them really what's happening. He's listening to it from the radio, and he's like a conduit to just share that information to as many people as he possibly can in this written way. It's incredible. He's 16.
16 years old, and so I invited John and Russ to go through them, and we all went through them recently, as John was mentioning, and just to kind of pick out maybe some of our favorite snippets, or just little parts of these flyers and these leaflets that really speak to us, and that we want to be able to share just a little bit, read a few passages, so that you, the audience, can just get a glimpse into what I consider to be the genius of this young man who was crafting these, pulling information from the illegal BBC broadcasts and from banned books that he had access to in his job at City Hall, and then his own thoughts and ideas and perceptions, and weaving them together into, in my view, masterful writing. I mean, I'm a writer. I mean, we've all written a lot, and it's incredible when you look at that. So anyway, I've invited each of us to take just a minute and kind of just chime in with some of our favorite little parts that we want to share and why it is. And do you guys mind if I start off with one?
Please.
Okay. So and it's from one of the original. I think this was either the second or third red flyer, not that he wrote, but that was turned into the Gestapo. And it's just 4 lines, and it says this. It says, "Down with Hitler, people's seducer, people's corrupter, people's traitor, down with Hitler." So just this very simple thing. And the reason that I actually really like this one is because in German, that first line says the Volkswehrführer, which if he were to say the Volksführer, that would be the people's leader. But he adds this little prefix onto the front of the word Führer, V-E-R, the Volkswehrführer, which means the people's seducer. So just with this clever little wordplay and this little shift, he is changing completely the meaning of what people may have been expecting that they would read about their Führer. And so for me, it was just this little example of, in 5 lines, where he's it's almost an example of resistance fighter poetry, if you will, right out of the gate. And so anyway, that's one that I just have always appreciated. Russ or John, either of you have something you want to share?
Lots. So, Russ, I don't know. You want to go first?
Well, I'll let you share something that popped to mind when you were talking, John, was just how voracious he was in his writing. I thought of Alexander Hamilton, and
yes,
he writes like he's running out of time. That line from the musical, and just somebody that maybe had this sense of an impending end or doom, and just felt that or saw that kind of equating those two together, just writing like there's no tomorrow. So.
I love that. The kid is nonstop.
He's nonstop. Yeah.
Love that.
Really. Yeah. So I'm looking at, and I'm looking off camera here because I have a screen of the pamphlets in front of me. So forgive me for just looking off to the side. But I'm looking at one that's pamphlet number 33. And he starts this one off quoting Mein Kampf, Hitler's Mein Kampf, and basically using Hitler's words against himself. So one thing that's consistent with Helmuth in these pamphlets is that he's constantly questioning and bringing out the Nazi propaganda and sharing facts that he's hearing from the BBC. And so just if you'll allow me, I just want to read just a little section of this. He says, upon closer examination of the reports, in parentheses, of the truth in capital letters, coming out of the high command of the armed services and the abominable Goebbels propaganda machine, it appears very clearly to have found its application. These people lie, 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 and are now entangled in lies to such a degree they hardly notice that with one blow any facts can place the stamp of lie on their constant swindles. I'm just reading a paragraph out of a long letter here. And in just a few lines later, he says this. He says, even if actual successes are lacking, such are being officially fabricated, so that the German people do not notice that not everything that glitters is gold. Now that last line there, not everything that glitters is gold, it's a reference to what we can assume, to Shakespeare. We've going through these pamphlets again recently. I've noticed that he's quoting Macbeth. He's quoting Hamlet. He's quoting Merchant in Venice, Twelfth Night. This particular quote comes from Merchant in Venice, which I think is super interesting because historians, they look at Hitler and his affinity for Shakespeare. Basically, Hitler appropriated some of Shakespeare's works, and Hitler loved Merchant of Venice, and he kind of like touted it as a support to his propaganda because some people think it's anti-Semitic and that Hitler was able to use that play to that end. But I love that Helmuth's using it here against Hitler, that not everything that glitters is gold. In other words, not everything that looks good and is polished and all this news that you're getting about Germany and how well we're doing in the war, it's not really great. And especially where that's coming from the play, I won't jump into it. I love Shakespeare and I can talk about the context of the play there, but I just love that he's using that phrase here in this letter.
In fact, it makes me wonder if Helmut knew that Hitler had a special affection for the Merchant of Venice, and so put it in there just as a dig, just as a dig. We know that most of Shakespeare's, in fact, perhaps excepting only Merchant of Venice, were banned. This was a British author, and so I don't know where Helmut got access to those banned books. That could have been from his work, or where he got access to the Shakespeare. But it's amazing to me, like you say, John, to see it just kind of woven into the fabric of these different flyers, and also quoting from other banned authors like Schiller and some of those others that were banned, and even Hamlet. Yeah, just anyway, amazing. Russ, did you have anything that you wanted that was jumping out at you?
Sure. It's funny, you guys know I love music, and there's always some sort of music tie for me in everything. And in 1998, a song came out by a Welsh band called Manic Street Preachers. And the song is called "If You Tolerate This, Your Children Will Be Next." And so I dug this song, and then when I became involved with this project and Helmut's story and started reading the flyers, one of them stood out to me very clearly, and this is something that Helmut wrote. He said, "Do you want to tolerate having the happiness of your life taken from you and your children cheated out of the most beautiful years of their lives? Do you want to tolerate this?" I'm like, whoa, that sounds like that song that I know. And I, later on looked up, where did, Manic Street Preachers come up with this, "If you tolerate this, your children will be next," and found out that in 1937, so, Helmut is, 10, 11 years old at this point, the Spaniards were in a civil war, the fascists against the Republicans, and there was a propaganda poster that said, "If you tolerate this, your children will be." Did some more deep digging, and the quote was they attribute to a Timothy Harrington, which was a miner born in Wales, and he left Wales, to go to Spain to fight for the Republicans, to fight against the fascists, which they were banned from doing. They were not allowed to do this. There was a non-interference treaty, with England and Spain. And so there are a number, especially from Wales, a number of miners that said, no, this is wrong. And they, would tell the immigration folks, oh, we're just going to Paris for holiday. made their way to Spain and would fight on the side of the Republicans. And so, they somehow, this guy is attributed to this statement. And I just wonder, as we look at Helmuth's influences, whether it's using, Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler's own words, or Shakespeare, he references the Bible, he references so many different things. If he was also very aware of, these propaganda posters that were made up that said, if you tolerate this, your children will be next. These were put throughout Britain as a way to, activate and appeal to the British citizens and government to get involved, to come and help fight for freedoms in Spain. And so, again, we just look at how many influences Helmuth was able to, draw upon and assimilate and create these incredibly beautifully written and complex treatises on, what was happening in Germany at that time. And I love this, there's so many influences on him. So.
Dude, that is so dang cool. And of course you would find a reference to an awesome 80s band. Was that 80s when that was?
It was 98, yeah.
98, okay, so late 90s, 90s band. But that is really cool. And you mentioned that he was also quoting from the Bible. That was an important theme throughout. Yeah. Did you?
I've got a couple there. I'll just read here from.
Yeah.
He says, "The time has come now. The Antichrist has established his Reich, and they are attempting to take away the Bible from the German people, so they will not be able to see through the insidious plans of Hitler and his followers. Christians, arise, open the Bible, read what it says in the prophet Daniel 11:20." Then he quotes from the Bible, "And in his place shall stand up a vile person, to whom they did not intend to give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in the midst of peace and obtain the kingdom by flatteries." And is there anybody more skilled at flattery than Adolf Hitler was? So here, Helmuth again is taking literature and using it to, make these statements to help wake up the German people. And one of the things that he says in some of his writings is, "Endure to the end, Germany, awake." Throughout his writings, there's these one-liners that Helmuth has that are just kind of like these call to actions. Another one, and then I'll pass the baton here, is, "Are you a friend of the truth?"
Oh man, I love that.
Just so.
Yeah, love that. And that passage that you read that he wrote from Daniel, the book of Daniel in the Old Testament, 11:20, when it talks about obtaining the kingdom by flatteries, it may be that a lot of people may not know that originally Hitler was elected. I intentionally don't say legally elected, because there was so much, there were a lot of flatteries, but there was also a lot of cheating going on behind the scenes. But he was elected legally at the beginning, and then obviously it just went downhill from there. But yeah, his references, Helmuth's references to the Bible, and for those calls for Germany awake. Another thing that he would put he started putting at some point in this process at the bottom of his leaflets was, "This is a chain letter, pass it on." Obviously an example of his hope that people would indeed do that. And I should say that, as I mentioned earlier, 9 of the red flyers were turned in, and 20 of the full-size leaflets were turned in. Carl told us that he wrote many more. We don't know how many more leaflets Helmuth wrote, how many more leaflets. We just know that for a year, these 3 boys were blanketing Hamburg streets at night with this. And so even what we have is, as amazing as it is, what we have to kind of delve into and read from, it's just a little sliver of what he was cranking out. Again, that reference to Hamilton. He was just writing like he was running out of time, just writing nonstop.
Yeah. Matt, and it's only up to us to kind of just assume and imagine how he was able to do this. We know that he had the radio, and we know he was good at shorthand. And when you read these letters, it's not only these inspiring statements to call people to wake up and to get them moving. Helmut's also reporting news from the front line. You know, if you'll allow me, there's one excerpt from one of these leaflets. Often, if any of you ever have the chance to really look at them, you'll see that he's reporting what's happening on the Eastern Front, on the Mediterranean Front. Like he's pulling this information, and again, we can just imagine or assume that he's sitting by his radio, shorthanding everything that he's hearing, and then taking that shorthand, going over to the typewriter, and hammering it out. And sometimes he's quoting people, and sometimes he's just giving the straight news. Like this one, he's reporting on Germany. He says, while the defenders of Leningrad have already penetrated the encircling German positions in several places, the, quote, iron ring around the city is no longer what one would expect of iron. namely that it can withstand small or even large tests of its breaking strength. Everywhere, Russian combat patrols have pushed wedges forward, and it may not be a question of whether, but of how long the envelopment will endure. And he goes on to just kind of explain the military strategies, what the militaries are doing, not only just German militaries, but the Italians, the Russians, the British. And he's outlining that for the people who actually end up with these pamphlets and who are brave enough to read them and potentially pass them along. Because everything that they're getting from their government is not this. Everything they're getting from the German government is Germany's doing great. We are winning the war on all sides. We are champions. And he's like, no, this is what's happening.
And I think that's one of the reasons that, well, obviously one of the reasons that the Gestapo was so worried about what was in. To some extent, I'm sure they knew the truth, and they saw it in these flyers and leaflets that were being passed out, and that's why they were so concerned. Can I just share one other little thing? Besides John and Russ, as you both so beautifully explained, he was crafting these masterful, really beautifully written, persuasive documents. He also wrote some poetry. And it's fun because it's there's at least one, he does it more than once, but there's one extensive kind of a doggerel poem that he writes making fun of Joseph Goebbels. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if I can just read a couple. What was happening is by the time he was writing this, the German army was in Russia. They turned and attacked Russia, and it was winter, and it was going horribly, and the soldiers were freezing to death. They weren't prepared for winter, and so Goebbels was asking German citizens to donate their furs and their warm gloves and those things, and they were sending them to the soldiers. And Goebbels said in a speech, don't worry, I've calculated for everything. And so Helmuth writes this poem in response to Goebbels' claim that he's calculated for everything. And if I can just read just a little bit of this real quick, he says, "Poor Joseph stands at the microphone, entirely unable to bring forth a tone. How am I going to convince the folk that Hitler's figures aren't just a joke? He could have said so, embarrassing, that he's calculated for everything. What Joseph says sounds pretty slack. Oh, woe is us, alas, alack. It's winter now and bitter cold, even chillier when you sit in a hole, 'cause shooters always seem to freeze. Didn't Hitler calculate for these? We're engaged in a struggle with hands and feet. It won't last much longer till the enemy's beat. They've been running along on their last breath, so Goebbels says. Soon comes their death. For the fact that Stalin has won of late, I suppose the Führer could also calculate." Anyway, it goes on for another page. Just this incredible, really biting bit of poetry against Joseph Goebbels, against Hitler, but doing it in a way that's got kind of tongue in cheek and having fun with it. Just amazing.
Matt, but what I love also about that one, because it goes on for a while, the very last words of that leaflet, he writes down 3 words, and they're in quotes, and it says words, words, words. That's a direct quote from Hamlet. Polonius goes up to Hamlet and he's like, "What are you reading, my lord?" And Hamlet's like, "Words, words, words." In other words, he's saying these are meaningless, right? And of course, by one meaning, that's what Helmuth is saying. Every word coming out of the Nazi regime, it's just meaningless. There's no truth there. But I also think, and maybe it's just me looking back on it, that's probably what it is. I don't know if Helmuth was meaning this. It's a little bit of a play on words, like what you were saying, Russ, with Hamilton. You know, look at Hamlet. If any of you know the play Hamlet, Hamlet is an orator. He loves words, right? So when he's saying words, it's not just like they're meaningless, but it's like these people don't know how to write. They don't know how to communicate. And Helmuth is saying this at the very end of this leaflet, that he's written this poem. And it's like a tongue-in-cheek almost, where he's like, these people think that they're writing and they're telling the truth in a way that they think is compelling. It's kind of like he drops the mic here. He's like, words. It's amazing.
Yeah. Helmuth dropping the mic.
Hubris.
Yeah, showing some hubris. And, you know, like this poem is kind of bombastic. There's so much that, you know, that's why the Gestapo was just convinced that it was a university professor that was writing all of these things, because of the way they were written. But there is also evidence of a teenager who's dropping the mic, who's getting his little teenage digs in, which is so fun to see as well. I kind of wanted to step back for a second and just maybe talk about why the Gestapo was so concerned. You know, why did the Gestapo see these leaflets that were going out as so dangerous? And maybe Ryan, to kind of set up this conversation, do you mind showing, this is a clip from a documentary that I did 20 years ago for PBS, and we'll get to hear from Karl-Heinz Schnibbe and then a couple other people I interviewed, where they just kind of mention really briefly how the Gestapo felt about these leaflets. Ryan, do you mind queuing that up?
I was scared. I was actually scared, because we read in the newspaper every day how severely these people get punished. The Nazis, they don't want you to know the truth, you know. The truth was deadly in Germany.
Die Gestapo hat sich mehr erregt und war in Wut, wenn sie eine Schreibmaschine gefunden hat, mit der gekämpft wurde, als wenn sie eine Pistole gefunden hat. Die Schreibmaschine war viel gefährlicher.
It's ironic that Hübener's vision for this, as I see it, corresponded with the Nazis' fear that his vision might in fact work, that this mass grassroots uprising might occur. Their fears were consonant with his hopes.
I just think that line is so powerful. Their fears were consonant with his hopes, and which is exactly, in my view, you know, why they were so worried about what was in these leaflets, what was in these flyers. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts to that.
I've got another leaflet that kind of ties in with this. That Helmuth wrote, Hitler and his accomplices know they must deprive you of your free will. At the beginning, to make you submissive, spineless creatures. Therefore, we are calling out to you, do not let your free will, the most valuable thing you possess, be taken away. We wish to live in freedom like our fathers, preferring death to living servitude. We place our highest trust in God Almighty and fear no kind of human power. You know, truth will set you free. Then, you know, if truth was present in these leaflets, that sets fear in the Gestapo's hearts, you know, and minds. They can't let the truth that these flyers were proclaiming be known, you know. So they could keep the people in submission. They could keep feeding them the lies from the propaganda machine. And so, I mean, there really was power in, you know, the pen, you know, being more mighty than the sword or gun. So,
yeah, I love that, and it is, it's true. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but I think that those words, Russ, that you just read, that Helmuth wrote 80 years ago, do you think they apply today? Do you think that people are trying to figure out, you know, when we watch the news, when we're trying to discern what is truth, what is really happening? Yeah, I think Helmuth's words continue to resonate 80 years later, you know. Maybe more important now. I don't want to overstate this, but maybe more important now than ever. Anyway, that's just some. And while we were chatting, Esther brought in just the thank you to all these people who are expressing interest. We got Leslie S. who expressed interest at $50, and Terry F. And then a whole bunch of anonymous. We got an anonymous from Wisconsin who came in with $500, from Florida with $150, from Hawaii for $1,000, another for $500, another for $1,000. Again, this is all just, these are expressions of interest that are happening as we speak, and that is just so dang cool. Any final thoughts before I change the subject to something else, just about the power of the word and the power of what Helmuth wrote? I don't know if you guys had any other things you wanted to say. I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, we were having a conversation this last week about your scripts. Remember that? And because Matt's written 4 amazing scripts for our series. And in the scripts, of course, we have Helmuth, our character, writing these pamphlets and writing these words. And oftentimes we see them on the screen. More often than not, we hear them. And I was so impressed, from when I first read the original screenplay years ago, I was impressed then by Helmuth's words. But early on, I had thought that it was Matt that was writing them. And even as, and remember that?
Yeah,
impossible. I didn't know if the pamphlets or leaflets were around, but they are. And Matt and his co-writer Ethan have painstakingly gone through the leaflets and have pulled out these segments of Helmuth's own words and have brought them into the story. So whenever you watch the series and you hear these words of Helmuth's within the context of the story, they're also true. They're also words that he wrote. And I find that so compelling and so meaningful, just jumping off of what we were just talking about, how his words are still meaningful today. They will resonate in this series, and they'll continue to resonate for anybody who watches it, because they're his words.
Thank you, John. And if I can just circle that back down to kind of where I started in this live stream, Helmuth's last 2 words to his 2 best friends, remember me. And the fact that we get to make this series and that now, thousands and thousands and hopefully millions of people will be able to hear his words that he wrote and remember him. I just love that. So, guys, thank you for sharing your insights and everything. Again, we've all 3 of us have been at this for a long time, and it's rewarding to be able to kind of dive back into the reason we're doing this, and the truth that Helmuth wrote. I mentioned up front that we got to air our first 30-second commercial on television just recently, and as you guys know, it was a lot of fun. It was kind of a last-minute thing. We got word from the TV station and from the entity that we're good to go. We're going to air those. We want to air them starting this weekend, and that was about I think that was Wednesday night. And they said, we just need a 30-second spot, a 30-second commercial. And we kind of looked at each other and went, okay, we'd cut together other things, but not that was, just right for this. And so working alongside one of the amazing editors and filmmakers here at Angel Studios, John Van Sickle, and also with incredible brand designer Vivian Wright, created this 30-second commercial in one very long day and submitted it, and then it started airing, like I say, just this last weekend. So let's go ahead and give everybody a chance to see the Truth and Conviction, the first official Truth and Conviction promo commercial. Cue it up, Brian. So, quick in, quick out. There it is, our first 30-second spot. What do you guys think?
Did a great job.
It's fun.
It did the job. When it started airing over the weekend, we, the whole purpose of it is to get people to visit angel.com/truth to express interest. It's we're still in the phase of spreading the word and letting people know about it. And one of the ways that we know that people are learning about it is when they visit our website and they expressed interest by certain dollar amounts or giving us their email. But just by when the commercials started airing this weekend, we saw a huge jump in those numbers, and it's still continuing to grow. So it's working.
Huge jump, yeah. And John, thank you for kind of expressing. I know that there are a lot of new Truth and Conviction fans tuning in tonight, and so maybe I can just kind of give a quick to add on to what you said there, John. Of course, our hope is that we're going to be opening up an investment round so that all of you who've already been expressing interest and all of you who are considering it can actually have the opportunity to be a part owner of this project. But right now, we're gauging that interest. And once that interest reaches a certain level, then we'll be able to open up that investment round. That's the plan, to open up that investment round. So right now, if you go over to angel.com/truth and take an opportunity to express interest at whatever amount works for you, then as that progresses and continues to build, the sooner that we'll be able to hopefully open up that, officially open up the investment round and take those significant steps forward to actually being able to make this series. So again, thank you for that. It was fun to see. I'll give just one quick little behind the scenes for that little spot you've seen there. There's that really quick shot of the Gestapo agent chasing after Helmuth, and he pulls out his gun and he yells "Halt!" And we shot that, of course, as you both know, with the actor who portrayed a good friend and a wonderful actor named Kurt Dowsett, who portrayed the Gestapo agent. On the night we shot that. When he stopped and he yelled "Halt!" and this was the director's fault because, like I say, Kurt is an amazing actor, but he just kind of said it in a standard American accent, "Halt!" And once we got into post-production and we're editing, I thought, oh, it really could be better. Maybe I should have thought of that when I was on set to have him kind of do it in a German accent. And so I cheated, and that's my voice saying "Halt!" my attempts at a German accented "Halt." So anyway, just a little glimpse behind the curtain, and that's my claim to fame. Now, every time I see that, I hear my voice. Sorry, Kurt.
That's what you'll be remembered for.
That's it. A bad accented German "Halt." So that's it. Well. Russ and John, thank you so much for taking some time to join in on the live stream. So grateful to have you as partners on this, and so excited to be moving forward together. So thanks very much, and I'll let you get on with your evenings.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks a lot, Matt.
See you guys. All right, I got to tell you, those guys. Are fantastic. Oh, there's Esther. Oh my gosh. So Esther's bringing these in, and it's fun to point out that Esther's handwriting these on little, in honor of the flyers, on little red sheets of paper that look surprisingly similar to one of Helmuth's flyers. But alas, this just tells us more wonderful individuals who are expressing interest. An anonymous person from South Carolina for $1,000. Patricia W. from Florida. Thank you, Patricia, for $150. An anonymous from Georgia for $1,000. Michael E. from Indiana for $500. An anonymous from Washington for $150, and another from New York for $500. Janice B. from California expressed interest at $18. Thank you, Janice. And I love that because not only is it important that the amounts of expressed interest, but the number of people that express interest is also really, really important. So we're so grateful for everyone who does. An anonymous from Utah who expressed interest at $1,000, Terry H. from Oregon at $150. So, wow. If I can just say this, I love The Chosen, and I watch a lot of Dallas Jenkins live streams and what they do. And as we were just getting off the ground in doing these live streams for Truth and Conviction, where we just didn't have a big following yet, and we're still building that and everything like that. But I would, jealous is not the right word, but I would longingly watch Dallas and others who had just all of these people that were expressing interest, or that were paying it forward and all those kinds of things. And it's really nice to actually kind of see how that feels and to see all of these wonderful individuals, you who are expressing interest at angel.com/truth. It means the world to us. Oh, a message on the screen from me. I just had a little voice in my ear say, oh my goodness. Okay. Thank you. This message is from Eric Schnibbe, who is Karl-Heinz Schnibbe's son. Eric, I'm so grateful you're tuning in. And Eric says, it needed more of my dad, Carl, JK. Eric, so grateful and honored to have you tuning in tonight and being involved in this. If I can just talk to you, Eric, for a moment. My friendship with your dad has changed my life. From the very first time that I called him up on the phone and asked if we could go visit him and if he'd share his story, and he said, yeah, come. And for the next so many years of spending so much time and having him share his story and just becoming close friends. And as you know, he loved to go to a little restaurant in the city where we both, in the city that he lived in called Siegfried's, this German restaurant, and we would go to Siegfried's on a regular basis. And just that time, spending time not only with a hero and a resistance fighter who suffered greatly for what he and Helmut and Rudy did, but so honored that he became a dear friend to me and to Russ and to John and to so many of us involved in this team, and his dear wife Joan. Eric, just thank you for tuning in, and thank you for leaving that message for us. Okay, I'm just going to tease one more thing for next week. So next week we have a live stream coming up on next Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time on the 12th of October. And there's some really cool stuff that I can't, they won't let me say what it is yet. But I will say this: if you believe in subliminal advertising, you may be able to figure out or get a little hint as to what we're going to be announcing this next week, and that's all I'm going to be able to say. But if there is, if there's anything to this whole subliminal advertising thing, you might be able to guess something. All right. Again, so next week, the 12th, we've got that one. On the 19th, Wednesday, the 19th of October, an even bigger and more amazing live stream. There's been a lot of planning and a lot of really cool stuff. A huge announcement on the 19th that we're all very excited for. And then that following week that whole week is when we'll be in Germany, in Berlin, for the different memorials to Helmut, remembering his execution on October 27th. And we'll be there at the place that it happened with the German government and so many others who know and are grateful for what these boys did. And you will be able to be a part of it. That whole week, we're going to be posting to our social media. We're going to be doing live streams that week from basically from like the 25th through the 27th, 28th. So just look forward to that, and I'm grateful that we'll be able to share that part of it with you. Okay, and if you'd like to, I just want to just ask if you haven't had a chance to go to angel.com/truth and check out our landing page there, and express interest if you feel so inclined. And even if it's something that maybe you've expressed interest and you watched the live stream tonight and you thought, boy, that kid Helmuth was even more amazing than I thought. I don't think that there's a rule against expressing interest again. I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I think that you can. So if you feel so inclined, of course, we would greatly appreciate it. All right. So now I said at the beginning that I was going to try and take at least a couple minutes to answer some questions. I don't know, Ryan, did we get some? We have some questions. Okay. So, and I'm going to have to lower my readers so I can see the questions and then respond. Okay. From Kelsey. This is Kelsey Whitaker, who may or may not be related, may or may not be my wonderful daughter. Kelsey said, what do you think younger generations can do today to stand for truth like Helmuth did? Man, Kelsey, that's a good question. And of course, that's a good question that comes from you. Here's something that comes to mind, because I don't know that, at least in America right now, most of the younger generation are not dealing with something, like Helmuth was, with the, totalitarian government and oppressive and, having all of their rights taken away. But they still need to stand up for truth like Helmuth did. And I choose those words, stand up, carefully. To make a decision to stand up, whether that be for the truth or whether that be in defense of somebody who's being bullied at school, or sometimes that may mean standing up and saying something that will bring the ridicule of your peers, but it's the right thing to do, and so you do it anyway. Standing up in that way. Sometimes I think standing up means admitting when we're wrong, admitting if we've spoken an untruth or told a lie, to step back and stand up and say, hey, I need to correct something. I look at Helmuth's example, how he stood up in his situation, and I think that, yes, the rising generation, all of us, can look at our own lives and say, how can I stand up? So Kelsey, thank you. Thank you for that question. Let's see. From Michelle Seguin, it says, Werner Sommerfeld would like to say hello, Matt, and we have been watching, and it's beautifully done. Thank you to you, Russ and John. Oh man, this is going to be my night of getting a little verklempt, a little choked up. Some of you may be aware that we recently did a live stream with Werner Sommerfeld. So Werner was a friend of Helmuth's. They grew up together. Helmuth and Carl and Rudy spent almost every Sunday at Werner's home. It didn't hurt that he had 3 really cute sisters, older sisters that were these boys' age. Werner is also a dear friend and is the last person living who knew and remembers Helmuth. And it is such an honor to sit down with him. And sometimes he'll call me up on the phone just to chat and give me compliments. And so I have so much love and respect for good Werner Sommerfeld. Werner, hello, and thank you for tuning in, and to your family for your longtime support of this project. Thank you. Let's see. For Matt, what potential time frame do you estimate from here to production, then airing? Again, from Eric Schnibbe, thank you. That's a good question that's a little tricky for me to answer. It really all depends on how soon we'll be able to enter the investment phase, and then from there, just how long it'll take to raise the needed amount. I can tell you what our plans are right now is that at some point next year, whether that's starting in the spring or in the summer, that we will have everything in place and be able to go over to, we'll be shooting this in Lithuania, up in the Baltic states, the capital Vilnius, and we'll be shooting there. It has an amazing downtown area that looks incredibly similar to Hamburg 1941. In fact, in some ways looks more like 1941 Hamburg than Hamburg does today, partially because during the war, later in the war, after Helmuth was executed, Hamburg was bombed horribly and had to be rebuilt. So the hope, Eric, is that we will be shooting in Vilnius next year, and the sooner the better. But very excited to that. 4 episodes, this 4-episode limited series that we'll be able to shoot over there, and then of course be working as fast as we can to be able to start sharing these episodes with all of our wonderful community that are tuning in tonight, that's growing bigger and bigger every day. So next year, we hope, is the year, and it right now looks like that's what's going to happen. Thank you for that great question. Let's see, this is from Jenny Heidbrider. Hi, Jenny. It says, Matt, do we know if these young men knew of the Lord? I love that question, Jenny. Thank you. I can give you a definitive answer. They did know of the Lord. And in fact, the way that these 3 boys knew each other is that they all were part of the same faith. They attended the same congregation in Hamburg together. And so every Sunday, they would be there. They were devout Christians, all of them. And as we were talking earlier about some of the things that Helmuth wrote in his flyers, a theme that goes throughout some of those flyers is him making biblical references, quoting a source from the Bible and then tying it into what his message for that day was. So yes, these boys, we know that Carl and Rudy shared with us that Helmuth was a devout believer. They also both said that he understood the scriptures a lot better than they did, and in fact, a lot better than a lot of adults. But I happen to know personally that to the end of his life, Carl died in May of 2010, and to the very end of his life, he was a devout believer, served in his church, and served the Lord throughout his whole life. So what a beautiful question, and I'm grateful to be able to share that little insight about all 3 of those boys who, for Rudy and Carl, lived to be older and were faithful throughout their whole lives. Thank you, Jenny. Okay, we'll take one more question here from Caleb Fisher. It says, when will cast be chosen, and how? How will one be able to join the cast or crew? Caleb, another great question. And I know I say the word chosen in your in your question there. I don't know if that was a double entendre or if that was intended, but the chosen has been great because they're shooting here, in the States, shooting in Texas and shooting in Utah, and so it's been really cool how involved a lot of the community could be gathering for the feeding of the 5,000 and those kinds of things. Our approach by necessity is going to be a little bit different in that, as I mentioned, we're shooting in Europe, and so it'll be challenging, to say the least, to bring 5,000 people over. We don't have a feeding of the 5,000 scene anyway, but to bring a lot of the cast or people who want to be involved over from the States would be prohibitive in several ways. I will share this, that the plan is that we'll be casting almost exclusively from London, from the UK, so having a mostly British cast. We'll be speaking in British English with just a little flavor of German thrown onto it. So there will be opportunities for people to, I hope that there will be opportunities for people to send in, personal tapes. Actors know what that means, is just to record yourself on camera and send that in, and we can look at that. But just so you're aware that, yes, most of our cast will be coming out of the UK, and then most of our background actors, what they used to refer to as extras, but our background actors will be Lithuanians who live there in Vilnius. So I hope that answers that question all right. And I think that's all that we've got time for as far as questions. Oh yeah, thank you. That's right. Again, in my ear, Ryan is reminding me of one other thing really cool thing that I forgot to announce. This may be one of the coolest things that I, of course, forgot to announce. Next week, Russ, John, and I are going to be flying down to Dallas, and we're meeting with Glenn Beck, and he has invited us to be on his live radio show. So I'll be participating in the Glenn Beck's live radio show on Tuesday the 11th, and we of course will be sending out some social posts about that and making sure that everybody's aware of that. It'd be really cool. As many of you as can to tune in live to hear that. It's really, it's fun because we were able to. I'd known for years that Glenn was familiar with this story. I think 12 or 15 years ago, he talked about Helmuth on one of his programs, and but it was great to finally be able to make contact with him, and he was so excited about this project, and so, like I said, invited us to come down. So next Tuesday, October 11th, we'll be on the Glenn Beck show, and then, of course, for those who can't tune in live on that day, we will make sure that it's available so that people can hear it afterwards. So anyway, like I said, lots of things happening. Go to angel.com/truth if you want to get involved and be a part of this incredible project. Something that we haven't done, and I'm going to close with this. I'll announce one more thing and then just say a few words and sign off. But we created a video early on after we partnered with Angel Studios that just kind of gives a more in-depth perspective on this story, how we found it, why we're telling it. Some incredibly powerful interview clips from Karl-Heinz Schnibbe, and even a great interview clip from the Academy Award-winning producer of Schindler's List, Gerald R. Molin, and he talks about his passion for this project. And I want to end, after I sign off, if you could just stay for a few minutes longer and watch this little video. It really is powerful and well worth watching. So having said that, I thank you again for tuning in and for your interest in this project. I'm grateful to have you along for what is going to be an incredible ride. And don't forget to tune in next week on the 12th for another live stream where we have a huge announcement. I wonder if anybody figured out a little hint that was in there. Turn in next Wednesday on the 12th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And I'll let you do the math for wherever you are tuning in from. And we hope to see you then. Thank you.
Salomon wohnt hier. Wir beraten schon seit Wochen. Ein Mann geht jetzt auf einen Tag aus und 600 für jeden Mord. Das ist der Küsse der Freundin, Schwester. Sie sind doch auch Jüdin. Sie sind Jüdin. Nein! Wir haben noch einen Jüdin. Haben Sie seit Wochen beobachtet. Wir wissen genau. Weiter! Hinten in die Tür rein. Los! Wir gehen jetzt hier rein. So wollen wir durchkommen. Scheiß Tür ein! Los! Salomon, komm raus! Mach die Tür auf!
You've just seen the proof of concept trailer for Truth and Conviction, which will be the first dramatic series about teenage resistance fighters in Nazi Germany. It tells the true story of Helmuth Hübener, who at 16 years old was willing to sacrifice his life to stand up for truth and freedom. There will be more powerful scenes to follow, but I just wanted to take a moment and invite you to join us. If you think this story should be a series, show your support. Click or visit angel.com/truth and let us know.
Matt, take 2, can AC. Mark.
How did you first discover this story of Helmuth Hübener?
I heard about an old man who was the last surviving member of a teenage Nazi resistance group named Karl-Heinz Schnibbe. Heard that he lived less than an hour away from me. I just called him up on the phone, asked if he would be willing to share his story with me. He said, yeah, sure, come on up. So I went up to his house, sat down with him, and let him just share what his experience was as a 17-year-old with his best friend Helmuth Hübener and another friend Rudy, 15, 16, 17 years old, standing up against Hitler. And they weren't using guns or fists to do it. They were using a typewriter.
I was scared. I was actually scared because we read in the newspaper every day how severely these people get punished. The Nazis, they don't want you to know the truth, you know. The truth was deadly in Germany. But I was nosy enough to want to know more.
The story that Carl told me that day has changed the rest of my life. I walked out of his house that day just knowing we have to make this into a movie. We have to tell this story.
We've had the opportunity to become really close friends with Carl over the years. He would share these experiences that he had. He would often get this distant look in his eyes. You could tell he was back in those moments. But to hear this, 80-year-old man saying, this is what we did, that brings a reality to it, that it's just not just a story, but people lived this. What came out of that was, this, not only we have to tell this story, but feel entrusted to tell the story from Carl. The screenplay is incredibly powerful. Matt Whitaker and his writing partner Ethan Vincent have really captured this engaging character piece set within Nazi Germany. And it's gained the attention of Hollywood producers, including Jerry Mullen, who was the Academy Award winner for Schindler's List. He understands the power and the importance of telling stories from that era.
It's really amazing to me to think this kid was 16. He wasn't 25, wasn't 42, he was 16 years old. And I had enough to realize that he wasn't going to give in to something that he saw was wrong.
One of the most important parts of the story for me was Helmuth's friendship with Salomon Schwartz, who was Jewish. One day, Salomon disappeared and the Gestapo arrested him, and Helmuth never saw his friend again.
We went to church, to our church house, and there was a sign on the door which read, Juden ist der Zutritt verboten. Jews not allowed to enter. And we had one Jewish member in our branch, Salomon Schwartz. And they didn't let that young man in. He stood outside the door, and when we opened up with opening him, he was crying, but they didn't let him in.
I wonder how I would feel if somebody took my best friend away. What would I do? For Helmuth, it was time to sit down and start typing up the truth. It wasn't too long after Helmuth started typing up these leaflets and putting them out that he realized he needed help. And so he went right to his two good friends, Karl Schnibbe and Rudy Woba, and asked him to help him.
Helmuth said, let's make a promise. He who gets caught first takes the blame. Don't incriminate anybody. And that sounded good to me because I thought I'm cool. I was the oldest, I said, they don't catch me. So I said, all right. So we went that night home with about 15 flyers, and Helmuth typed on it, Hitler the murderer, Hitler is the guilty one. I put him in telephone booths, I put him in mailboxes. The following Sunday in church, he saw me coming and he waved at me and I waved back and he yelled to the church, they haven't arrested you yet, have they? And I said, will you shut up? I was, so that was Helmuth, joking,
They were dispersing these treasonous leaflets throughout Hamburg, Germany. They'd put them in phone booths and mailboxes and sneak them into coat pockets at the opera, eluding the Gestapo for almost a year.
Eventually, they were caught. They went to trial. At a certain point, Helmuth decided he had to stand up and he had to take the attention and focus all on himself to save his two friends. And so that's exactly what he did. He stood up, he did what was right, and he let the consequences follow. Helmuth was executed for standing up for truth. Carl and Rudy spent years in prison and in hard labor. An experience I'll never forget was going with Carl back to Germany and visiting some of those places where he was held as a prisoner, as a 17-year-old. But also visiting the site where Helmuth was executed. And being there with Carl was truly moving. There was a busload of teenagers that pulled up with their high school teacher. And they got out and they were looking, visiting this site. And he just immediately gathered all of his students around Carl and said, "Tell us your story." To watch Carl tell them what he had done when he was their age was so powerful. They were getting it. That for me was when a seed was really planted. I began to realize that this isn't just a powerful story. This is a story that changes people who hear it. Just another quick invite. If you want to see this story made into a series, click or visit angel.com/truth to show your support. Don't worry, you're not buying or committing to anything. We just need to gauge how many of you want to be a part of bringing this story to the world.
Action! We are partnering with Baltic Films in Vilnius, Lithuania to shoot Truth and Conviction. We produced 2 films with them previously, and we're excited to go back and work with a really great production partner. They've previously produced HBO's Chernobyl series, as well as HBO's John Adams miniseries and the BBC's War and Peace. Another partnership we're very excited about is with Angel Studios. They've had such incredible success with the Chosen series, and we're excited to bring this project to the global audience that they've been able to reach.
Our mission is to tell stories that amplify light. And when we saw the story of Truth and Conviction and what the creators behind that story, we realized that they were going to be able to tell a story that has those same principles that The Chosen and any other project that amplifies light. And it's a story that needs to be told today. It's a story that matters now.
Helmuth had big blue eyes, really big, dark blue eyes. And I never saw Helmuth emotionally, He never showed his emotion when something happened. And when I put my arms around him, I told Helmuth, I see you pretty soon. His eyes filled with tears. And he said to me, I hope you have a better life and a better Germany. And then he cried.
We talk about stories like Helmuth's story of someone sacrificing their life for someone else. I've always felt that there's this, across humanity, it's like there's this deep connection with those kinds of stories. For me, that's what Helmuth did. At some point, he must have known he was going to be sacrificing his life to do that, but he did it anyway. That compels me to tell this story.
I personally am asking you to get this made, get it out there, let the world understand what this young German kid did in 1942. Talk to your friends and tell them, even though he died in 1942, his example of courage, of character, of commitment, we're talking about today. I love what he's about. I want to be just like him.
Thanks for watching. Help us share this powerful story to honor Helmuth, Carl, and Rudy, and hopefully inspire a new generation. To express your interest in this series, click now or go to angel.com/truth to show your support.